Today we're talking with Jessica Hyatt of the Cooperative Extension Service, and Jessica is our horticulture agent. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am doing great. We missed you last week. You're here the second and fourth Friday of each month.
Right.
And if there's a month that happens to have a fifth something in it, well, it just didn't work out for us.
Right.
But you're here today.
Yes.
And here it is toward the end of November, well, actually the middle of November. So what are we talking about today?
I wanted to talk about planting spring bulbs. And this is something that sometimes people forget or don't think about because obviously you think of them in the spring when they're actually flowering.
Yeah.
But you have to plant them now in order to get those spring flowering bulbs in your landscape during early spring.
Okay, so you brought some bulbs with us.
I did.
With you today. So what are we looking at here?
Brought some different bulbs, 3 different kinds. Brought some crocus. These are the very small ones.
Those are small.
They bloom very early, usually late winter or very early spring. They're the first little flowers that seem to come up most of the time. And not very tall, pretty small, tiny flowers, but they're, pretty little flowers. A lot of them purple.
Kind of close to the ground.
Yeah, usually close to the ground.
But I've seen these things come up through ice-covered snow, grass.
Yeah, if we have a late winter, late snow or, bad temperatures or bad weather still late into the season, they'll still pop up and show up. So they're usually the first flowers that come up.
All right, now, this one I'm holding in my hand here, this one's got a little peak on it there.
It does.
It looks like it's getting ready to grow. Is that right?
And that's usually a good sign that these bulbs are,
Healthy?
healthy.
Yeah.
They're doing well, and would be bulbs to pick or to select to plant in your landscape or your garden.
Now this one has 2 or 3 little growths
It does.
coming out on the side and out the top there.
Yep.
Right.
And really a bulb, what it is like you took a plant and you just condensed it or compacted it into this little package. And everything you need, the food for the plant for that year and for it to survive is all already in that bulb, ready to go.
Oh, okay, so that's a little compact plant in there.
It is.
It's kind of like you take it and you shrink it.
Exactly.
Down to, okay. How do you, what kind of bulb is this?
These are tulips.
Oh, really?
And tulips, a lot of people like them because they have large flowers and really have a lot of different colors to pick from. They have that major impact of color in the landscape in early spring. One downfall with tulips in Wayne County is that our soil temperatures are pretty warm and you have to treat these like annuals. So a lot of people plant them and then they're disappointed when the second year they don't come back up. But our soil temperatures are pretty warm. If you went further north, they would do fine and treat them like a perennial, and they'd keep coming back year after year.
One reason they grow so well and are associated with the Netherlands is because it's cooler temperatures, cooler soil and all that. And I read something interesting that these did not originate in the Netherlands. I always thought they came from Holland, but they were brought there by somebody. But anyway,
I never heard that. So. That's pretty neat.
I may have just made it up. I don't know. But anyway, those are tulip bulbs. So you have to almost treat them like annuals here.
You do. If you
Can
want
you take
tulips,
them indoors?
You could try to dig them up and save the bulbs and then try to replant them. You just have to be cautious that they don't stay through the summers and those hot soil temperatures.
Okay.
And otherwise, you just have to accept the fact that they have to be replanted every year.
Okay. All right. All right. Now, what do we have here?
And these are daffodils. Most people are very familiar with daffodils, sometimes called narcissus or jonquils. They, kind of go by 2 or 3 different names because there's many different groups and types of daffodils around.
A daffodil.
And daffodils naturalize very easily. They come back every year with very little work or very little effort. Just a matter of planting them and they keep coming back.
How tall does a daffodil get?
Daffodil about 1 foot or so. Tall.
Are they often confused with other yellow?
Sometimes they can be. Yeah. And
what is a narcissus?
Narcissus is a type of daffodil. It's a group of daffodils. They're a little different as far as I think they're very fragrant, and just as far as kind of that flower is a little different, and they're yellow. Most of them's yellow.
Maybe a little smaller.
Okay. Yeah, might be a little smaller in size.
So a narcissus is a kind of a daffodil.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So these are daffodils. All right. Now, how do you plant these? Or how do you plant any of these?
It's pretty easy to plant. The main thing you usually need to be careful of is the spacing, because you can see we've got different kinds different sizes.
Different sizes.
And of course, these that are very small, these crocuses would be planted not as deep compared to tulips or daffodils. And you would plant these bulbs a little bit deeper. And a good rule of thumb is take the width of the bulb.
The width?
The width of it.
All right, side to side.
From side to side, and 3 times as deep as the width.
Oh, okay.
So about 3 times as deep. So obviously these are going to be closer to the surface and these deeper in the ground.
So that's maybe 3/4 to an inch in width.
Right.
So that would be maybe 2 to 3 inches in depth.
Right.
And it goes just like that, is that right?
Yes.
It goes in the ground,
and
with the pointy side up.
Yep, there's a base to it, and very easy on the daffodils to pick out. You can see the roots, that's the bottom, and so you'll put them in the ground that way.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Tulips
Roots on the
might
bottom.
not be as much, but you can still tell there's a tip there that's the top, and
pointy
this
side
is the
up.
bottom. Yep.
Okay.
So you got to make sure you plant them right side up, and so they'll grow, sprout, and go towards the ground, the surface. And otherwise, there's not a lot you have to do. A lot of people ask about fertilizing bulbs, and like I said earlier, everything that's needed for that plant to grow for the year is already in there. So when you fertilize, you're looking at fertilizing for next year and future years.
Okay.
A lot of people you see recommendations to add some type of phosphorus like bone meal or superphosphate, because if you have it kind of below the bulb, that's going to help with root development. Phosphorus will help with the root development.
But should it be in contact with the root?
No, it should not be in contact.
So you put the phosphorus in, put soil on top of it.
Right, yeah, incorporate into the soil, and but what you're trying to do, instead of having the phosphorus up in this area, is have it below so it reaches those roots. Right. And phosphorus is otherwise a typical garden fertilizer like a 10-10-10. If it's a slow release, you can add it into the soil as you're planting, or if you want to use a soluble garden fertilizer, you can fertilize right after planting, and then they say again when you see the sprouts coming above the ground in the spring.
So when you see the sprouts coming above the ground in the spring, go ahead and fertilize at that time.
Yeah.
So all this is nothing more than a mini. This is a compressed plant with food storage. Everything it needs is right in here. So you dig a hole 3 inches deeper than this is wide, or 3 times deeper than this is wide. You put the pointy side up, root side down. First thing you do though is you mix in some phosphorus, and then put a thin layer of soil on top of it so the roots don't come in contact with it. Put that in, cover it up, and va-boom, bada bing, bada boom. You got yourself a plant.
Then you can forget about them, not worry about them, and they show up in the spring. And the reason we plant them in November is they do need a chilling period. And that's the purpose of planting them November in order to get them to bloom in the spring. They need a chilling period. So around November, this is when our soil temperatures are starting to get below 60 degrees, and that's allowing for those cold temperatures to chill them, and that'll encourage them then to grow and bloom in the springtime when it warms up. Yes.
So what's the latest window? November's a good window, but
November's
can you go
the best
into
one.
December?
You could go into December some. If they don't reach that chilling requirement that they need certain number of hours, and depends a little bit on the bulb, but most of these are about the same. If they don't get that 2 to almost 3 months, what will happen is they'll bloom closer to the ground and not really develop as strong of a stem, so they tend to be very compacted and short and don't really seem to get above the ground much.
So it's not only that the temperature has to be below 50 or 60 degrees, but it needs to be below 50 or 60 over a certain length of time.
Exactly. And sometimes in really warmer temperatures, say if you go to the coast or further south, they might stick it in the refrigerator to get some of that chilling requirement, because their soil temperature is not going to be cold long enough.
Right.
So that's an option too.
I've heard of doing that. You dig the bulbs up and then you put them in a paper bag.
Right.
Put them in the refrigerator for a month, and then come January or 2 months, but in January put them in the ground.
Yep, you can do that.
You don't freeze them though, do you?
No, you don't freeze them. You still are aiming for that 60 degrees.
Okay,
and
around 60.
degrees.
Okay, around 60 or slightly below.
Right, And the only other thing I've read or seen is I've seen a recommendation if you do refrigerate them for that chilling requirement is not to put them near fruit, because fruits and vegetables develop gases that can, you know, encourage them to try to go ahead and sprout. So I would be cautious not to put it near your vegetables and fruit in the refrigerator.
Put them in a separate vegetable bin. You got bulbs over here and, and tomatoes and not tomatoes, but other stuff over here.
Right.
Okay. So how do you pick out a good bulb? When you go to the store, you go to the garden center, you say, "Oh, I love that. That's so pretty."
Yes.
How do you pick it out?
A couple
what do you
things.
do? I mean, it's got to be a test, right?
I think one thing is kind of be aware where it's at. I've noticed before going into places with bulbs is they might have bins set up.
Yes.
And you got to think about that if the bulbs look very similar, if you think you're buying, say, a yellow daffodil and there's another bin next to it that's white daffodils, people look at them and toss them.
And toss them back.
Or, you know, kids play with them.
I hadn't thought of that.
That you could have mix-up. So if you have them in a bag packaged up, you know what you're getting. So if you're very particular and want a certain type of, you know, color, then you be very cautious of bins that can get mixed up.
All right.
Otherwise, just making sure there's no bruises, making sure they're not, you know, kind of squishy feeling when you touch them.
All right. You want them to be firm, no soft spots.
Right. And no mold or any bruising. Look, like that one. That one looks like it's might have started getting beaten up a little bit.
Okay. And, all right. Well, let's take a look at that again. Take a look at it.
Yeah. Right here, you can tell that that first layer has came off.
Moving it a little closer to the camera there. There you go. All right. Yeah, the first layer is starting to peel.
Yeah, and you can see there's a little bit of damage there. It's probably just where it's been, you know, banged around some and moved around and so forth, gotten a little bruised. It probably still would do fine, but you see compared to, you know, one like this, then, you know, that one looks like it's in good shape.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just a matter of, you know, selecting the bigger the bulbs, the bigger the flowers is another thing to consider.
The bigger the bulbs, the bigger the flowers.
So don't go through and pick all the small tulip ones. If you want big tulips, you know, pick the larger ones. They develop, you know, larger flowers.
Overall, bulbs are pretty hardy.
Yes. Yeah.
What's the difference between a bulb and a tuber?
A bulb is got everything kind of packaged into the plant, and if you just like an onion, if you cut it open, you got those layers.
Right.
And so your leaf, everything's packed in there. A tuber is more of an underground root, or, you know, you talk about rhizomes, underground stem.
Right.
It's kind of just more one part of the plant, where your bulb is that whole plant, everything's packaged together.
A tuber would almost look like, say, a potato.
Right.
Yes. Okay. A root, if you would.
Right.
All right. So bulbs, tubers, you plant them about the same, or tubers are closer to the surface, maybe?
Yeah, again, it just goes back to the size of it. If it's a larger one, probably go a little bit deeper in the ground.
All right. And if you have bulbs in one location and they've been there, how often do you split them, and how do you do that? About
every 2 to 3 years. If you see them getting really crowded, especially daffodils, because they naturalize so well and they multiply, that if you see them crowding together, you know, dig them up and separate them, spread them out, and to plant again. And around this time, you know, it'd be time to go ahead and separate them and plant them. Some people go ahead and separate them early and store them in a paper bag, and then they will plant them during this time. So there's a couple ways to go about it.
Okay, very good. All right, tubers the same way, every 2 or 3 years, maybe you can get away with a little longer.
Yeah.
I think I haven't divided mine in 8 to 10, maybe. Maybe that's why they're not producing any flowers.
Yeah, a lot of times whenever people say, well, they've stopped flowering, that's usually the first thing is, are they crowded and need to be divided?
Okay. Okay, very good.
Yes.
And if anyone has any questions, do you have a pamphlet or something on?
We do. At the Extension office, we have a lot of information, bulbs and other things related to gardening and plants, and we're located on the corner of George and Chestnut Street in downtown Goldsboro.
All right, at Wayne Center.
Yes.
That long brick building.
Right.
Your office is in there, and they go into the big parking lot.
Yes. Yeah.
Only take one parking space at a time, please.
Please.
and go into the office there, and one of those nice ladies there will help.
Yes, and we've got lots of information on all kinds of things related.
So how would somebody contact you? What's the phone number?
The phone number there is 919-731-1525.
731-1525, 731-1525. Jessica Strickland of the Cooperative Extension Service, and today we've been talking about bulbs. You'll be back in a couple of weeks, and we'll be talking then about, well, let's see now. Will we be back in a couple of weeks? Yeah, we will. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, and we'll be talking about, what are we going to talk about?
Talk about planting trees and so forth. I know a lot of people's been trying to plant trees during this fall season and so forth.
This time of year, that's exactly right. I'd like to also touch on maybe how to buy a Christmas tree, too.
Oh, sure. We can definitely do that, because that'd be the time of year.
And if you have a question for Jessica and you can't reach her at the Cooperative Extension Service, email us at wgtv@waynegov.com. Attention, Wayne. Or send it to me, and or send it to just send it at wgtv@waynegov.com. We'll get it, and we'll ask Jessica next time she's in the building here. And I thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Jessica Strickland, Cooperative Extension Service, and I'm Wayne Alley.